Research integrity in peril. Plagiarism by the Food and Drug Administration. The Food and Drug Administration is the world's largest agency for overseeing the quality of research when it comes to the safety of food and medicines. When the FDA plagiarizes the work of others, it places the integrity of the research programs they oversee at risk. If the FDA itself plagiarizes the work of others, then what credibility do they have in preventing the researchers they oversee from doing the same thing? The integrity of the research programs conducted to assure the safety of the foods and medicines we take can literally make the difference between life and death. The story we are sharing with you today is about how the FDA is violating research integrity by plagiarizing the work of others. The situation is really no different than catching a high school or college student stealing the work of others in order to write a term paper. The most common reason for plagiarism is simple laziness. The failure to adequately research the ideas you are writing about and then claiming them as your own original work. Another frequent cause of plagiarism is assuming that ideas are common knowledge. But research integrity tells us that all ideas originate somewhere, and it is the researcher's obligation to find and cite the work of others. But by far, the most egregious form of plagiarism is rephrasing, reordering, or representing in some other form the ideas of someone else in order to purposely disguise them as your own original ideas. I began my doctoral research in 2002 at the George Washington University. The central idea portrayed throughout my research was simple. If you can prevent something bad from happening in the first place, it's better than just waiting around to pick up the pieces afterwards. This was long before there was any wide recognition that the culture of food safety had to shift from reaction after the fact to preventing food illnesses before they can do harm. In 2002, what is now common knowledge about the need to place new emphasis on prevention was a new and to some people a radical way of thinking about things. The idea of preventing bad things before they happen, as presented in my research dissertation, is now the cornerstone of the 2007 FDA Food Protection Plan. It was way back in 2002 when we envisioned building the world's most advanced computer software for risk management. The new ideas conceived way back then are now the basis for many of the buzzwords you now hear in today's food industry. Ideas like science and risk-driven, quantitative versus qualitative analysis, event paths, critical nodes, prevention versus reaction, indicators and warnings, and so on and so on. In our first computerized tool, Food Defense TQ, with TQ standing for threat quotient, we developed a set of criteria to mitigate against both the occurrence of and responses to food-related events. In the FDA's Food Defense Mitigation Strategies database, they stole our ideas to do the same thing. Food Defense TQ was developed 2 years before the FDA plagiarized and duplicated it with the release of their Food Defense Mitigation Strategies database in 2011. The FDA IRIS tool is another example. In this case, the FDA duplicated the idea of using computational risk analysis to support food event scenarios. Just like our Food Event Analysis and Simulation tool, or FEAST, the FDA IRIS tool allows you to structure and apply risk values along food safety and food defense event paths. The development and release of FEAST by FoodQuest TQ predated the release of the FDA IRIS tool in 2010 by over a year. In this example, the FDA plagiarized our idea of identifying and using the nodes of the food supply system to identify and categorize preventive measures to stop food defense events. As you can see here, a full 2 years before the FDA released their Food Defense Mitigation Strategies database in 2011, we had already developed and were applying the idea of using the nodes of the food supply system as part of our Food Event Analysis and Simulation Tool, or FEAST. Another tool we developed is called POISON. POISON is a metadata repository of intentional and unintentional food events. As you can see here, POISON is used to develop event path scenarios that are loosely based on real-world events to create training simulations for food-related emergencies. The FDA Freebie tool takes our ideas to do the very same thing. Our research and methods to create the same type of learning simulations duplicated by the FDA predates by over 2 years the 2011 release of the FDA's Freebie tool. Since the time Freebie was released by the FDA in 2011, they have established a major grant program for industry, local, and state governments to support the conduct of Freebie exercises free of any charge. In 2010, we developed a new computerized tool to help the food industry test and develop food emergency response plans, procedures, and protocols. The new FoodQuest TQ tool was called FREE, standing for Food Response and Emergency Evaluation Tool. In July 2011, the FDA released a tool called FREE-B, standing for Food-Related Emergency Exercise Bundle. The FDA Freebie tool plagiarized our use of carefully structured scenarios that were loosely based on real-world events to create food emergency preparedness learning environments for improving responses to both accidental and intentionally motivated food emergencies. The idea of using these types of structured learning environments to improve responses to food emergencies predates the FDA development of their Freebie tool by over 5 years. Shortly after 9/11, the FDA decided to use a vulnerability assessment tool that was originally developed by the Army Special Forces in the 1950s to target enemy infrastructures during wartime. The use of Carver plus shock is now the cornerstone of FDA's counter-terrorist efforts in protecting the food supply. Since the 1950s, there have been numerous updates to Carver plus shock, but many post-2007 changes contain ideas that are plagiarized from our POISON metadata repository and our other FoodQuest TQ tools. For example, as this slide demonstrates, the FDA has taken our idea of event path steps and simply renamed them as templates to disguise the theft of our ideas. Here's another example. In our POISON metadata repository, we build event sequences that consist of each causal step in a process. Here, the FDA has taken our idea of breaking down processes and events into steps to create simulations and analyze food production chains. In this case, the FDA has simply added a graphic interface. Another example of intentional plagiarism. Our ideas of using event paths and production chain sequences predated these updates to Carver plus shock by over 2 years. As these screenshots show, The FDA has also taken our idea of expressing the relationships between the different elements of the food supply system as set forth in our poison database. In this specific case, they have simply added a graphic interface to disguise the idea as their own. Again, our idea of using event paths and production chain sequences to analyze complex food supply systems predates these FDA updates to Carver plus Shock by well over 2 years. In December 2012, the FDA released their Food Defense Plan Builder tool. Yet again, the FDA stole our research and the methods we use to create carefully structured questions based on scientifically derived food defense countermeasures. As these screenshots demonstrate, the FDA took our idea of carefully structuring food defense questions that are based on scientifically derived food defense countermeasures to use as a guide in building food defense plans. The FDA was already familiar with our Food Defense TQ and Food Defense Architect tools. They were briefed on the tools over a year earlier. Again, our research and methods for building food defense plans predated the efforts by the FDA to construct Food Defense Plan Builder by over 2 years. We have shared with you only a very few examples of the gross plagiarism being committed by the Food and Drug Administration as they work to force FoodQuest TQ out of business. But to stop the FDA, we need your help. If you are interested in supporting our efforts to hold the FDA accountable for violating research integrity and unfairly competing with small business, we ask that you visit the link below to watch the short video and sign our petition calling for action to stop the FDA. Thank you.